Segment 2 of Skyline Honolulu just a few days away from opening up. Now the focus goes to Segment 3 and beyond.
We'll be talking to Lori Kahikina, the CEO of HART, plus Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos-Tam about possible plans to expand the rail line to UH Manoa. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now as we are just about to get to our first guest. We always want to remind all of you who are tuning in both on air and online to engage in the conversation. You can do that in a number of ways. You can head over to Facebook and enter your questions for our guests in the comment section, or you can email us at spotlightnow@hawaiinewsnow.com.
And we've got some of those emails ready to go for our first guest, HART CEO Lori Kahikina. She joins us now. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
A very exciting week for you.
Yes.
We've waited now the airport segment, all eyes on this one, going to Middle Street. Tell us how this week has been so far.
Oh, well, actually for us, leading up to October 1st was crazy. We were trying to meet Mayor's deadline and hand it over to DTS, and we made it. But now we're a little bit on cruise control when it comes to segment 2. Handed that over, so the grand opening, all of that planning is now in DTS's hands. But leading up to that point, you know, my team, just so proud of them, what they've accomplished. Always said end of the year. Mayor pushed it up 3 months, and he's a coach. He always pushes high goals, and we want to make him proud and happy. So we met it. So very proud of my team.
What do you think will be one of the biggest things that riders may notice about this when they get on the rail? What is the one thing that you think may be surprising, maybe for those who have used Skyline before? Is there anything that will stand out as different about this segment?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I'm an engineer geek, so some of the things that they might notice or not notice, for one of the biggest things for us as engineers that they will not notice is the Middle Street Station. One of the columns under it, supporting it, it's in the canal over there, the stream, and it is the deepest shaft in the entire world. It's 357 feet down. You would never expect that, you know, when you first start constructing the project, but our team did it, and that's because of the soft material. They had to drill all the way down till they got to the hard material. So they're not going to notice that, but I just want people to know what our team went through. But the one thing they will notice, when they're coming in towards the airport, there's a tight S-curve. So, you know, they might be wondering why in the world would HART design it that way? And there's logic. The tarmac of the airport. So we had to avoid it as much as possible. So we're cutting just a tiny little edge of it. And it is the highest point of the system because any plane, the largest plane that they have there, if it reverses back, the guideway, it has to be able to fit under the guideway, the tail. And then, of course, we need to tight S-curve to come into the airport station. And then when you come out, we're actually the lowest point at Lagoon Drive because we're in the flight path. So just some engineer geeky things that I would like to share with the public that they're going to notice out there.
That's very interesting. I know ridership is not necessarily your responsibility. Once you hand it off to DTS, it is up to them.
Yes.
But that said, there's a lot of eyes on this segment in particular. What are your expectations when it comes to ridership and how people start to use it?
I'm glad you said that's not HART's kuleana, but it is important. People need to understand we are spending billions of dollars on this system. It needs to have utility, right? We're going to we've already spent about $500 million. We're going to spend another $500 million to complete the system to Civic Center. So ridership is paramount, and it's fair. But I do stay away from, well, you can expect X amount, because I'm not the expert at that. I know there's a lot of projections, but there's a lot of factors that go into that calculation. And so I tend not to talk about that. But Mayor, starting October 1st, full court press with the media, social media, commercials he has putting out there. And his goal is 25,000. Like, oh, that's a very ambitious goal, but he's doing his best to get those ridership numbers up. And, you know, just ancillary. I'm at church on the weekend, and someone comes up to me and says, you know, I work at Pearl Harbor. there is no parking for us. Or I work at the airport, there's no parking for us. So we are so excited to use it. So I believe you will see a bump up. I just don't know how much.
And that 25,000, that is on a what basis?
A daily basis.
A daily basis?
Daily basis.
Wow.
We are at, I want to say Roger's numbers was still about 4,000 to 5,000. So we were on the Rick Hamada show. That's not individual riders. That's because it's most of them are round trip. Yes.
Let's talk about the whole experience. So getting on from segment 1 and now to where it goes. How long of a ride is that? And how much time do you think that drivers would save if they moved over to the rail line, knowing now there are, this segment will be completed to segment 2, which includes segment 1. And if you're starting at the beginning, how much time are you looking to save? How much of a difference will it make?
Well, that is definitely not my wheelhouse. Remember, I'm construction. Yeah. You got to get Roger on the show to answer that. But same thing. Those are projections. It's about 20 minutes either way. But if someone is riding versus driving, all of the factors, are you going at peak traffic time? Is there an accident on the road? So I think there'll still be a time savings, definitely a stress savings, because even if it's the same time, let's say, or even if it's a little bit longer on the train versus driving, I can relax. I don't have to worry about people cutting me off and upsetting me. So by the time I get into the office, now I'm all upset. I can do my emails. I can listen to music. I can watch movies. It's a much definitely a more relaxing commute than if you're driving, and you also save on your how much it costs to upkeep your vehicle, gas, registration, insurance. So there is positives to it.
That extension itself is relatively short, about 5 miles. But when you think about the value per mile, because a lot of, from starting so far outside of town, I think a lot of people feel like it's kind of this project that's out there if you don't live in that area. Yes. Tell me a little bit about how you look at the value per mile of this second segment.
I actually don't look at it as value per mile. Our mantra is plan, design, construct the orders that we've been given. And so we are inheriting, so far segment 1 and 2, we inherited what our predecessors were working on. All I can do is ask my team, this is what we have, let's try to do it as prudently and expeditiously as we can. I don't look at the value per mile that way. When we look at value, we look at value of the taxpayer's money. Every decision we make, is it in the taxpayer's best interest? Because we are the stewards of their money. And I remember I just a couple of weeks ago, I had to give a presentation to a condo in downtown because we're going to be impacting them, right? Construction, so I understand the irritation. And I was quite taken aback when a woman, I had the contractor tutor with me. Do you have to sue HART to get paid? I was quite offended by that. And so I said, first he said no, but I needed to respond and said, understand, when contractors are suing HART, we are the stewards of the taxpayers' money. We will give them exactly what they are owed, not a penny more. Just because they want to ask for $300 million, that doesn't mean they're entitled to it. When we settle for a number that is fair and reasonable and justified. And so I'm not quite answering your question, but that's how we look at the value of the money that we're dealing with.
Let's talk a little bit about where things stand right now with just the overall construction. And I think that people who live in town are beginning to get a glimpse of what so many people on the west side had lived with, seeing actual work being done, especially what we see in the Nimitz area. Can you just give us an update of what's happening right now on that corridor in Nimitz? Because, I think there are a lot of people who were taken a little back by some of the changes that happened to the roads and the rerouting that's happening there as well. But the timeline of what people can expect for an area that so many people use to transport through the island.
And just Nimitz Highway, that's a main thoroughfare. And so we had to work very closely with HDOT and DTS to make sure what we were implementing, it's going to have a major impact, obviously, but if we could minimize as much as possible. And so our traffic control plans were approved by them and implemented, but still working with them. For example, when we first blocked off Nimitz, and I wanted it done before the back-to-school jam of University of Hawaii especially, we as a team, including HDOT and DTS, we implemented it and Bethel Street. So there were certain left turns that we needed to maintain. Smith, Bethel, of course, Alakea. We thought, can we just do one left turn onto Bethel? Even though the traffic control plan said two, let's try see what happens if we just do one. And I personally, if I'm going to the Rick Hamado's show, I'm intentionally drive down Dillingham and Nimitz was backed up to City Mill and Zippy's. I was like, this is not good. If I was going all the way in the right lane and going to Alakea, no problem. But if I'm trying to turn Bethel, that traffic was backed up all the way. And so we worked with our contractor, H.DTS. We do have to implement that second Bethel Street. And so we did. And you could see an immediate change in the traffic on that street. So it's not perfect. It is painful, and we are going to be there for the next 5 years. So the utilities are pretty much out of the way, but we still need to build the columns, and that's going to take time, the columns and the guideways. So right there on Nimitz, and that was the thing too, I told Tudor, do not block all of those lanes on Nimitz, and no work gets done. That is the biggest irritation for commuters. But you can see they're already mobilizing heavy equipment. What you see out there right now is there's an oscillator out there, oscillator table, and that's how they start to put in the first shaft into the ground. And so that's going to be our first point. Whether we go west or east, west towards Iwalei or east towards Halekauila, it depends if we can get out of Tudor's way, get the utilities out of the way, and that's what will determine which direction they're going to go. And we're also going to build a trestle because they're working right over the water right there. So we've been working with E&V. Again, our stakeholders are so critical for us. There's a pump station right there. We're basically building a bridge right over that pump station. So the public will start to see it. It's impressive to start to see. It's irritating, I get it. But also as an engineer, just the massive work that they're going to be doing in that tight corridor, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty tight.
Will that be the sort of lion's share of the disruption, or are you anticipating more disruption, and what would that be as you get closer to Civic Center?
I think that will be the lion's share. Once we start to get up the columns, the guideway, they're actually going to start the foundations for the stations before the end of this year. Now that is incredible. When Tudor told me that, he said, on the west side, lessons learned, the different packages for west side and airport, the contractors waited too long to start the stations. And that becomes the critical path at the end because they're so difficult to build. But they're going to start early, and it's just the foundations because we're still going through the iterative process of the designs with the designer and also the community. The community is allowed to give feedback not for structural changes, but more aesthetics, how it's going to look. So, yeah.
What about what's happening on Dillingham right now? So we know obviously segment 2 will end at that middle street, and the work has gone on for some time at Dillingham as that's part of this next phase, but has been ongoing with utility movements and the columns going up there. What update can you give us in regards to what's happening in that Dillingham corridor?
Sure. So Dillingham, that utility relocation should be done by the end of next year. But right after, in fact, they might be overlapping. Tudor would love to start there at Middle Street and start working, but it's a matter of, again, if NON could get out of the way enough that Tudor can start bringing in their equipment. But NON should be done end of next year, but there's not going to be too much more relief for the community because Tudor is coming in right after that.
There is so much that we could explore. I'm curious, are you finding any surprises underground? Because when we have talked to you in the past, you would tell us that we dug 6 inches and we found lines. What kind of surprises are you finding downtown?
Well, mostly what we are worried about are EV. Halekauila is a very well-known hotspot, and so we have cultural and architectural monitors. Whenever we are digging, they are there to tell us and to guide us. So when we find the EV, sometimes it's fragments, sometimes it's a full body. SHPT has to come in. We notify SHPT and also the lineal descendants, and they determine how we treat that. Of course, very respectfully. What do we do? Sometimes, and especially on the airport side, it's we put the EV. Respectfully, we secure them, and then when the stations are built, then we put them in the stations. And so it just depends what we don't, HART does not make the determination. We are instructed on how to respectfully put the EV at rest when we're done.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the HART board. Obviously, there was some news that came out that Colleen Hanabusa, who has served as chair, is stepping down and was resigning. Wanted to get your thoughts about that, if that was at all surprising to hear, and just knowing the relationship that you two have had publicly, and some of the public disagreements, how you think this will impact the project moving forward and your role serving in the capacity that you serve.
Right. Yes and no. It was a surprise, not quite a surprise. There are personal issues that she's dealing with, so we kind of knew, but I didn't know when. But I thought she may have made it all the way to the end of her term. I want to say it would have been June of next year. So when the letter came in, I know the media was going to ask me, like, well, are you happy? And it's like, I want to be very respectful of her. And my response at the board meeting was, despite our differences, I can honestly say I learned quite a bit, when I'm dealing with her, and whether I liked it or not, I liked what she was saying. It forced me to be a better executive. So we did do a little ceremony for her at the HART board. My understanding, city administration and even city council have resolutions to honor her. But I'm not sure exactly when they're going to do that. But we had a groundbreaking OO for her, so I asked Mike Formby if you could please deliver that, and we had a card prepared for her, so hopefully he can deliver that to her soon.
I'd like to ask you, our next guest is going to be Tyler Dos Santos-Tam, of course, council member who represents District 6, which is now being heavily impacted by this project. He has introduced legislation that could make it possible for HART to start to acquire parcels to extend the rail line all the way to University of Hawaii at Manoa. That had been something that had been talked about years and years ago and was kind of put to bed because we're not getting past Civic Center to Ala Moana. What are your thoughts about that resolution? The potential for that to actually happen.
Right, and just let me make it clear, I cannot take a position on it without board approval, so it will be going on the board agenda this Friday, and they will be speaking about it, giving their feedback the following Friday, so that I can present to City Council. And just to make it clear to your viewers, this was not HART initiated. Both council member Tyler Dos Santos and Radiant Cordero are initiating this. They asked for information, and so we provided information to them. But when we first saw the bill, the language that was introduced to University of Hawaii at Manoa, we're very pleased, because you can feel the traffic, right, when University of Hawaii is in session. So we would love to get there, but there's also been talks about going further west to Kamakana'ali'i, because we're criticized actually in that same presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago. Well, why are you guys just stopping there? Why didn't you go all the way? It's like, please remember, we were there first. There was nothing out there. That's where we were told to build. So it does make sense to go further on, and then DHHL, I believe, is very supportive of that. So I think the language may change. That's up to the council members how they do it, and maybe that's what the board is going to discuss next week Friday. But you're right. With the projections of our funds, majority is GET, TAT, that sunsets in 2030. So if there will be any extensions, we will have to find a funding source, whether it's federal, state, city, private. We have to find that before we can execute.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I mean, the fact that a mall was built, an entire mall was built after the rail even just started, talks a lot about the longevity of this project. But as we look ahead, as we continue this discussion about what the rail looks like beyond Civic Center in Kakaako, there has to be some planning, I would assume, for extension efforts to go underway. I mean, we're talking about segment 3 now, but you folks were planning segment 3 for years now. So if while you are in working on this segment, are you folks already looking at the possibility at Ala Moana, say, or UH Manoa, and what does that look like? What are some of the conversations that need to be happening now to prepare for it, so there isn't this delay should it be approved to move forward?
And that's the point that some of the council members were trying to make clear at the last council hearing, is that it takes years to do the EIS, to do the planning. And so, and you want to do it properly so that lessons learned, you don't want to repeat the same mistakes. And so that's what the intent of Bill 60 is, just to authorize HART to just start looking. We cannot. In the charter, we are given our orders from City Council and administration. And so that is to Ala Moana. So I can't even, or to East Kapolei, I can't even start to look beyond that without their authorizations. They need to extend the minimal operable segment, which is right now only to Ala Moana and East Kapolei. And so that's why, to your point, we need to start already so that by the time construction is done for segment 3, actually, we should already start moving now. So to your point about to Ala Moana, when we did the bid, the contract for City Center Guideway Station, there's a base bid, which was to Civic Center. There's a bid additive, I know that's contract language, to get to Ala Moana. So we put that in there so that the contractors can bid on that line item, and Tutor Perini did. So actually, on Friday, what we'd like to ask the board approval for is just to give the authorization to Tutor to start the design to get to Ala Moana. We have enough funds just for the design. We don't have enough for the construction part, but just start working on that next step.
I don't know if you know this offhand, but what is that funding difference that you think you would need to actually do the build?
Again, this is, I'm pulling it out of the air, but to get that last mile and 2 stations is about 1.5 billion to get to Ala Moana.
Wow.
Which is pretty remarkable because it's seemingly such a short distance,
Yes,
but the amount
it's a
of that it would
difficult
have to go
area.
through is,
Yes.
seemingly very difficult. And just for the sake of the public and understanding what that would look like, would that continue along Halikuwila, and then where ultimately would it end? If it goes to
Yes.
Ala Moana, where exactly
So
on?
right now it's slated for Kona Street. And so, and General Growth, over the years, we haven't spoken to them too much because we can't get to them, but prior, they were very accommodating. They would love to integrate it into the shopping center, but Kona Street is really where all of the bus hub is. But if we were to continue down that route, we will get blocked in because there's buildings now. So we don't have a good solution to, okay, if you're going to get to Ala Moana, how do you come back out and continue on to UH? So we would need the authority from City Council to start looking at that.
Oh, and to that point, actually, that's a really good segue to this question that was sent in by Kevin. Thanks, Kevin, for writing in. Says, Lori, if UH Manoa is our final destination, how will the rail make it to UH since the condo called the Central has been built blocking the path on Ala Moana Boulevard? Would you go Atkinson? Can it bypass the center via South King Street to get to UH? I mean, this is
exactly why we need the planning authority. So very good question, Kevin, and I don't have that answer. I mean, there's even been talks from a couple board members to fly over Convention Center. I'm not sure. I'm in agreement with that as an engineer. Tunnels going underneath. That's very expensive. That's the first thing I did coming into HART. I do not want to do utility relocation on Dillingham. Let's go underneath like we did with that Kailo Kaneohe tunnel when I was at E&V. And so there are things that we need to look at and weigh the options, but right now we just don't have that authority to do that.
Well, I just want to get a little clarity. I mean, a flyover? Would you actually?
I
would that? I
know.
mean, I know you're an engineer, and I know the marvels are amazing,
Yes,
right? You started out
yes.
telling us that we have one of the deepest
Shafts,
shafts in the world, right?
Right.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But we have, I mean, and if you did a tunnel, we have hard volcanic rock down there. Like that seems pretty tough.
Actually, that makes it easier. When you're in the soft material, that's what makes it more difficult. So I'm using the KK tunnel as an example. When we're boring through and you're in the hard material, the machine, the tunnel boring machine can make it through that. It's when you're getting into the soft material that it bogs down and things start caving in on it. So the hard material is actually better for us. But if you ask any engineer, anything is possible with time and money. So you need to weigh that. We can construct anything, but do you really want to spend, let's say, $2 billion to do a flyover? I don't know. And I don't know what that cost is. I'm just pulling that out of the air. But we don't have a solution right now. I cannot answer Kevin's question because we haven't done any analysis on that.
Well, let's, as we wrap up our conversation here, talk a little bit again about this new segment opening up here. And another viewer, Jerome, actually had a message to you. He says, "Thank you for making our lives so much better. No need to find parking, no need to ride share, just bus and rail all the way," from Jerome.
Thank you,
So as
Jerome.
you hear these types of comments, it's I'm sure that there are a lot of positive, but when you look at the term of this project, there has just been so much negative.
Yeah.
How do you feel that the opening of segment 2 will change the perspective of the public now that it is servicing the airport, and which could, really help to increase ridership?
Yes, yes. Actually, from day one when I came in, the negativity, like you said, just surrounded this project, and rightfully so. People are frustrated. It's very late. It's very over budget. But as people started to see the new HART administration making progress, trying to move things, and again, we inherited things, and we're just trying to make things better. You know what you said, you've been given lemons, you just want to make lemonade out of what you've been given. And so it's still today, every week, somebody from the public stops me and thanks me for one of your own team members. As soon as she opened the door, she said, "Thank you for everything that you're doing." And, I get the credit, but, my team is behind me, and they have done such an incredible job. We've got such a small, tight team. We did a lot of, streamlining when I came in, and I know they're overworked, but I think the public perception, we've turned a lot of people around. We have a long way to go. You still have the naysayers out there, but when we open segment 2, I think there'll be a little bit more positivity, but I'm not going to be able to change the mind of everybody.
If folks want to check it out for themselves, this is the weekend to do it. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm not sure I would say go this weekend because it's free. Tomorrow is the ceremony, so public's not allowed yet tomorrow, but starting the 16th, free rides on the entire transit system, so the bus and the rail, I believe this weekend, but people can start to ride on Thursday. But it might be crowded. Just like when we opened first segment, it was packed, hundreds of thousands of people coming out. So maybe wait till the hype dies down and then use it regularly.
Okay.
I do want to just follow up with another question that was sent in, and they asked about some of the positions, because that was something that also came up during a time when you personally were getting critiqued.
Yes.
What can you tell us about any of the vacancies and some of the limitations and issues that you've had trying to fill not only the leadership positions, but some of the other positions that have been open?
We struggle like every other agency, not just HART. You got all the city departments, state departments. We do struggle, especially engineers. So any engineers out there listening, please apply. But also, I'm very picky. I am very picky on. I feel like it should be. You should view it as being an honor to work for HART, work for the city. And so just anybody that applies, I'm not just going to hire you. You need to have the qualifications and the drive and have the right attitude. So that has a lot to do with it too.
We know you want to celebrate segment 2, but looking ahead, segment 3, what is the time trajectory for that?
Still on track for 2031, but it's early, right? It's 2025. So, but right now our schedule still shows 2031 to open.
Okay, Lori Kahikina, thank you so much for
Thank you
being
for
here.
having
Always great
me.
to catch up with you. We'll see you again soon. Coming up after this, we're going to be talking to Council Member Tyler Dos Santos-Tam. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight Now as we continue on our conversation discussing segment 2 of the rail that is just about to get underway. We want to encourage all of you who are watching to send in your questions to us here on Spotlight Now by either heading over to Facebook. You can enter your questions to the comment section. We've been tracking it throughout the show, or you can also email us here at spotlightnow@hawaiinewsnow.com.
We want to welcome in our second guest today, and that is Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos-Tam, representing portions of Kakaako, downtown, Chinatown, Punchbowl. There's a long one. Papakolea, Paoa Valley, Nuuanu, Iwilei, Liliha, Alewa Heights, Kalihi, and Kalihi Valley. That's a big district, and that is right smack in the middle of what we're talking about today.
It is, and it's so wonderful to represent this district because it has so many of these kind of older neighborhoods in town with their own set of charms and, of course, their own set of issues and problems as well to work on. But it's never a dull day representing District 6.
District 6 heavily impacted. What are you hearing from constituents about, the second segment being opened? How do you think the project is going?
Yeah, well, first of all, I take the bus most places. I mean, I do have a car, but living in town, it's just so convenient to get on the bus, and it gives me the chance to listen to folks about their issues and problems and really just get a sense of what's going on in the community. I think that there is excitement. Finally, rail's getting into town where it's useful to a lot of people. Getting to Lagoon Drive and transferring to the new bus routes that are coming or to Middle Street and continuing into town, that's going to be a game changer. There are some growing pains, of course, as we look forward to rail, getting further into town with the new segment that's being built. There's going to be disruptions to businesses, and we have a whole program that we set up 2 years ago to help mitigate that. And then, of course, the bus routes are going to change, and it's, the bus routes, it may affect somebody's commute out there, but the idea is it's meant to be more integrated and to serve as many people as possible.
When you look at the history of this project, it has, of course, spanned decades. And Keahi Tucker actually did a great piece on Hawaii News Now that kind of explains the history of it. And so being in the position that you are now, this generation of the Honolulu City Council, knowing all that has happened with other council members that have fought and debated over this project particularly, what are your thoughts about the direction of where things are at right now with the rail? Are you happy with leadership, with the way things are being implemented, or maybe some of the concerns that you have about where things stand with this project?
I think the progress that's been made over the past few years has really been night and day versus where we were in the early 2010s, where, as you mentioned, there was all this back and forth. I think there are people actively cheering for the project to fail. And that's totally different now. We have a project that's open, and on Thursday, people are going to be able to ride it all the way to Middle Street. And right now, the City Council, we're debating whether to allow HART to start planning for beyond Ala Moana Center or beyond East Kapolei out on the west side. That's a totally different conversation than it was 10 years ago. And I think that's a testament to how far along we've come. I think there's a recognition that when we said years ago it's going to go to UH Manoa, well, if we want it to go to UH Manoa, we need to actually start planning for it to get there. And so that's why I introduced Bill 60 along with Councilmember Cordero, because now is the time. There are some people who said, well, it's too early, we need to wait and see. If you go back to when this project first got started, in 2005 was when they authorized the GET for it. It wasn't until 2010 that the EIS was even done. It took 5 years. And so if we don't start now, we're not going to hit the deadline in 2031 when we get to Kakaako to continue it on to Ala Moana or beyond. So we need to start the planning now. Not construction, not anything, super detailed, but at least some idea of how we can get beyond Ala Moana up to UH and beyond East Kapolei over to even maybe as far as Ko'olina.
Wow, Ko'olina, that would be something. Tell me a little bit about Bill 60, what it would actually do, just for folks who aren't familiar. And also, you heard Lori there talking about sort of the leaps and bounds that rail would have to make to actually make this possible. I mean, do you think this could actually happen?
I think it has to happen. Again, we see the difference when UH is in session versus when it's not. We know that UH is a huge driver of traffic and just, people's commutes in town. Rail has to get to UH Manoa. And in order for us to plan, HART needs the authorization to actually do the planning. Right now, HART is only allowed to plan from East Kapolei to Ala Moana, not an inch further. And so that means if there's a property that comes available between Ala Moana and UH along Kapiolani Boulevard or University Avenue, or if, say, DHHL out in Kapolei, because they have a bunch of property out there, says, hey, we want to do this development, but we want rail to integrate. HART can't even have those conversations. As Lori mentioned, HART can't even have a conversation of what to do beyond Ala Moana. And that's an engineering challenge that they're going to have to resolve. So I'd like to give them the authority to do that. Again, it's not a blank check for construction, but it's simply saying, how can we do this? And we've seen a lot of the problems that rail encountered in the early 2010s, things that created cost escalation. If we plan early, we can avoid some of these, I think, negative outcomes.
And so far, what has been the response from your colleagues on the City Council, as well as constituents and those in the community about this plan and about specifically Bill 60 and what maybe you have to do to educate people about what this actually is?
Yeah, I think there's still people who are skeptical about the project. And I think there's also folks that live on the windward side or the North Shore that say, hey, rail is never going to impact my life. It's not going to affect my commute. Why am I paying for it? Well, we all live on an island, and at some point, maybe your kids are going to end up living in town or on the west side, or maybe, you're going to have to downsize and move somewhere. We all live in an island community. We all have to take care of one another. I think, again, we've said for years, even from the beginning of this project, when, Mayor Hanneman was around back then selling this project to the public, the idea was it would go to UH Manoa. But we're never going to get to UH Manoa if we don't start planning now.
Do you think that, to make this happen, Lori, you heard her say she has the funds to do the planning to Ala Moana. She does not have the funds to actually build. Do you think that the taxes should be extended beyond 2030 so that we do have the funding for this? Is there another source? Do we try to get more federal monies? How do we actually pay for it?
Well, that's a question for the legislature, and if I could get the ear of my colleagues across Punchbowl Street, I would say, of course, this is the biggest project that we've ever undertaken as a state, and it's something that's going to transform our island. And yes, we should extend the GET to help pay for this. They also, a few years ago, changed it so part of the tourist tax, the transient accommodation tax, pays for rail as well. Maybe that's an alternative, but we can't wait until we figure out the funding mechanism for the planning before we authorize HART to do the planning, because then we end up in this sort of chicken and the egg situation. Again, HART can't even plan 1 inch beyond Ala Moana. They need to be able to do that in order for us to even think about getting to UH Manoa, which I think we all agree it ought to get there.
With the opening of Segment 2 happening in just a few days, what are you hopeful that it will do for these communities, many of whom have suffered through some of the construction that has gone through it? And we're continuing to see that along the Dillingham corridor, many businesses continue to be impacted by this. But what are your hopes that Segment 2 will provide to those riders and to these businesses?
I'm really excited. And again, as somebody that depends on public transportation, I take the bus almost every day. It's going to be transformative because people are going to be able to get not just to the stadium, but into town and then transfer to a bus, their final destination, wherever that may be. And similarly, I live in town, but it gives me the chance to get out to the west side. I take my bike out for exercise. I can put my bike on a bus and get to Lagoon Drive and take that Lagoon Drive bike lane. It's a nice, big, wide open thing, or the Sand Island bike lane. And so I guess what I'm getting at is also the changes that are coming to the bus system in conjunction with the opening of rail is going to be transformative as well. And it's really going to help UH students. There's going to be a 1-seat ride from Lagoon Drive straight to campus. For tourists or other folks going to and from the airport, it cuts down the hour and 16-minute ride right now down to somewhere in the 30 to 40-minute range. It's going to be transformative.
I want to ask you about another issue in your district, and that, of course, is downtown. Downtown has been plagued with a lot of difficulties. We've had some pretty high-profile violent incidents, including an acid attack earlier this year. Now the new Downtown Business Improvement District. Just for folks who aren't familiar with what this is, tell us about how what it is and how you hope it'll change the neighborhood.
Yeah, so before we start talking about the Downtown Business Improvement District, we can talk about Waikiki. So Waikiki has had a business improvement district for almost 20 years now. And what is a business improvement district? It's basically It's almost like a homeowners association where everybody pays in a little bit. There's a board of directors that governs how those funds are used, and it pays for things to improve the district. So in Waikiki, it's paid for the Aloha ambassadors, it's paid for additional security. And in downtown, I think its focus is going to be on security and safety, on cleanliness, things like power washing, as well as coordinating more events. Downtown after 4:30 p.m. is pretty dead. But there's an opportunity, I think, to enliven it, to have some activities on the weekends, to utilize Fort Street Mall, which is this big blank canvas for events. This past weekend there was that ESPN Kids Festival there. There's going to be other things along Fort Street Mall. And so the Business Improvement District is 75 cents per $1,000 of value for one of these office buildings. And everybody pays in a little bit, but it's going to pay for these kinds of benefits, which downtown really needs.
Overall, what are you hearing from those businesses? Are they in support of this? And how do you foresee selling it to these businesses who may be struggling because of how slow things are in downtown right now? And the argument that this is just adding something else for them to have to pay for.
I've heard that from some of the businesses down there, but for a whole lot more, I think there's a recognition that their customers are sometimes reticent to come downtown, especially in the evening, and that's something we have to break through. There's folks who come downtown and say, well, I really don't want to come back. It feels dangerous. It feels sketchy. We have to break through that as well. I think there's a lot of hope. I mean, the new AC Hotel that opened on Bishop Street, that thing is full every day. It's exceeded expectations. We see new restaurants opening on Fort Street Mall and in some of the other places downtown. And I think to really take downtown to the next level, we need to have, again, that sense of safety and security, the power washing and cleanliness, and other activities to bring people down there.
There are some folks in Chinatown who said, well, what about us? Why not include Chinatown in this? Is there potential that Chinatown could be, brought in or have their own? I mean, there is a concern that some of the issues will essentially get pushed to other parts of the community, which are struggling as well.
One of the Chinatown leaders put it really well, that downtown and Chinatown really are Siamese twins. They're really siblings. And the problem, I think, is in downtown, you have a lot of these sort of larger office towers, larger property owners, whereas in Chinatown, there's a lot of generationally owned, very small businesses. And to get their support and buy-in, it's going to take a lot more effort. But we're going to start that process. I told a lot of the Chinatown leaders, we're not going to forget about Chinatown in all of this. I was just in Chinatown right before this to pick up some lunch. I got some char siu. And it's also a neighborhood that's on the upswing. But I think that to have a business improvement district there is going to take a little bit more work. And so over the next few years, hopefully we can get there. But again, these two neighborhoods really do depend on one another. So I think the notion that we're just going to push downtown's problems out onto Chinatown is not the case, because also in Chinatown, we're working on pushing for more police patrols. We're pushing for more core activity, which is the kind of social workers and ambulance and kinds of things to deal with the homeless there, as well as some new housing and other things. One last aspect that affects both downtown and Chinatown is reviving the arts. You think back 10, 15 years ago, I mean, there was a really robust art scene that after COVID and other things kind of went away, but there's still sparks of it. And we want to make sure that the artists and the art community also has a chance to thrive again.
Well, one of the issues that ultimately many people associate with downtown is homelessness. How would you categorize where things are at right now, where we know that there continues to be a large segment of a homeless population in these communities of downtown and Chinatown, and how you're addressing that, considering all these other factors that you're mentioning?
So I think, downtown and Chinatown, we have made a lot of progress on the homeless issue. I always say it's 2 steps forward, maybe 3 steps forward, but 1 step back, right? And something happens in LA and a bunch of homeless people end up on a plane here, and now we got to deal with them. So that's an example of the 1 step back. I think one of the other challenges that we faced is the easiest to address homeless folks, the folks that simply want a shelter, or just need a little bit of mental health treatment or need some sort of daily pill or something. Those are easy to deal with. And for those folks, many of them, we've given them kind of the help that they need. That means the ones who are left out on the street are the much more difficult cases that are going to be much more intensive to work on. But we have the recipe for it. I mean, we know kind of what these folks need. The problem is there's not enough of it, right? We know there's a need for transitional housing. And then after they get to the transitional housing, there's need for permanent housing that a low-income person, like somebody coming out of homelessness, can deal with. We need to be working in all of these ways. I call it the all of the above approach, because that's what we're going to need downtown. But I think that there is a sense that downtown Chinatown are on the cusp of really a new chapter, and I think it's really exciting. But you're right, homelessness is the one thing that we really have to deal with down there, and we're working on it.
You know, when I look at the neighborhoods that you represent a lot of sort of working areas, for lack of a better term, working class families who are, you know, taking the bus to work, taking the bus into Waikiki, and really trying to make it. And we see a lot of pressures on these families. We know about the Alice population here in Hawaii. These are folks who are working hard, but maybe one car breakdown and it lands them in a very difficult position. Given that we're seeing all these federal cuts and the strains that are on these families, I mean, what are you hearing, and what can the city do to support those families?
You know, this is one of the things that keeps me up at night, is how we can help, you know, these families. You're right. I mean, I represent Kalihi Valley, I represent Palama. Downtown in Chinatown has a lot of, you know, folks that are just struggling to get by. I think we as a city need to have some vision as to how to help these folks. I mean, right now, this morning, we heard a proposal to increase the bus fares from $80 a month to $90 a month. So over the course of a year, that's $120 per bus rider more that they're going to have to pay. And for seniors or disabled, it would be a quarter more every time they ride. And I'm totally opposed to this, and I've been raising a fuss about it, because these folks are the ones that really need the help. There's other ways I think that the city can help, you know, our low-income populations. We're taking some vacant city lands and trying to build housing on it. I think the challenge is the housing need is so great that this might just be a drop in the bucket, but for the families who can get in there, I mean, that's also going to be transformative. You know, we see the bus drivers, there's talk about a strike. Kaiser, you know, the nurses are on strike. I mean, families are being squeezed, and I think there's a lot of working families out there that are saying, hey, we need a little bit more, and we need help. And so I think the city can play a role in this. We have our Office of Economic Revitalization to help a lot of small businesses. We go back to rail construction. We have the Transit Construction Fund, which is meant to help some of the businesses along there just stay open. You know, it'd be a shame if they closed and then rail comes up and it's replaced by a Walmart or something. There's so many things that we as a city need to do to focus in on those who are really struggling and really in need.
You know, I do want to bring up the bus issue right now, and what we're seeing with the drivers and this potential and how this could impact segment 2. You know, this is a very critical time where we've heard all along of the integration of the bus system into the segment 2. How, with the timing of this, I mean, how concerned are you about this timing and the impact that it may have as segment 2 is about to launch?
Well, I have my fingers crossed, toes crossed, every, you know, good luck charm that we can have, that, you know, the OTS and the Teamsters are going to be able to sit down and come to a reasonable agreement on this. My background before I was on the council was in the construction union, so I know how important it is for the unions and the employer to negotiate fairly and to make sure that everything works. The last thing I want to see is a bus strike. I mean, I use the bus a whole lot, and I sit there with, you know, the dozens of other people who rely on this each and every day. And I think beyond the bus strike, it's also how do we get more people to ride the bus and to get onto rail. And actually today in our budget committee, we had a conversation about this very technical thing called the fare box recovery ratio, but it's basically a technical kind of policy governing future fare increases. We want to, you know, avoid these future fare increases to get more people to use public transit to get out of traffic, and also just make our city a lot more walkable and safe for pedestrians.
Yeah, I mean, there have been movements in other communities that we've seen where they make the bus completely free to really, because we have these environmental mandates on us as a state to go move towards clean energy, and public transportation is a big piece of that. It feels like our city could be moving the other direction. What is your argument to your colleagues? I know this issue is sort of evolving as we speak, but how has your opposition to those fare increases been received?
I think it's raised a lot of important questions. There is a balance to be struck. I don't think it would be reasonable for every single bus on this island to be free. That said, how do we make sure that those who really need it can pay for it, that we're really taking care of our low-income folks who depend on the bus each and every day, and to make sure that the system is robust and gets to where people need to go. In my district, in the back of Nu'uanu Valley, they truncated the number 4 line a few years ago, and there weren't that many riders on it. But for the people who did depend on it, I mean, it was tragic for them. And so I would never want to see that happen for another community out there. So it is a balance, but I think these conversations have really started a lot of critical thinking around how do we pay for the bus. It is a critical city service, and thinking 20 years down the line, what do we want public transit on this island to look like?
We have covered what has happened at the City Council, and in the past few months, there has been a change, a shakeup, if you will, of leadership that you were a part of. I just wanted to get your sense of the pulse of the relationship between your fellow council members, of where things are at, because for a long time we heard about how great everyone got along, and then there was some disagreements, this leadership change. How would you characterize the relationship that you have with the current leadership, and just how things are after all of this transpired?
Yeah, well, I think people look at our elected bodies and try to read the tea leaves and how things go. There's 9 of us, and we all work in the same office. We see each other every day. There's no hiding. And so, we continue to be collaborative, which is what we need. I think the leadership change that happened back in June, that I guess I was on the losing side of because I'm no longer the budget chair, I think that there are some differences in vision for how the city should be, differences for what kind of policies we should be pushing. From my perspective, just like on the bus fare, just like on our sewer fees, I really think that those who are in need, those who are trying their best to save water and save sewer, should be paying less. Those who are low income, who depend on the bus, shouldn't have to pay more. I think those are questions of sort of the vision of how our island goes. And every single council member, all 9 of us are elected to think about these questions. And I think that's reflected in the bills that we move forward and all of that. I'm very happy that even after the leadership change, things like the Downtown Business Improvement District are moving forward. Some of my bills and ideas are moving forward because regardless of who these ideas come from, if they're a good idea, if there's something that's going to make a positive difference for our community, I think they deserve a hearing and should be moved forward.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you briefly about public safety, because we did touch on it briefly. But outside of the context of homelessness, we know that there's been pressure on HPD. We don't have enough patrol officers. There was a big push to put a lot of cameras downtown. Do you think that's making a difference? Are you pushing to get more officers in your neighborhoods to try to mitigate some of this crime? I mean, you have Kalihi as well, and we saw some gun violence there not too long ago. So what is your thought about the public safety piece for your district?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think the cameras downtown in Chinatown are helping. The work on the illegal game rooms, the 3 bills that Andrea Tupola and I pushed, are really starting to bear fruit and shut down some of these illegal game rooms. But there's more work to do. As we know, we're 460 officers short, but my concern is actually not simply on the officer side, but within HPD itself, there's also all kinds of other vacancies, from secretaries to the folks processing evidence to the folks just dealing with every other aspect. There's vacancies throughout the department. We also need to work on that. If all we do is recruit another 100 or 200 officers, but there's not enough people to process the evidence and to do the paperwork, we're still going to be stuck in the same situation. And so I think we need to look at the bigger picture as well when it comes to HPD and how we can support the entire department. Again, we are short on patrol officers, but we need all the other staff as well, because if we don't have them, it's not going to function.
Okay, last question. Will you be riding the rail this weekend?
Absolutely. I can't wait. In fact, on Thursday morning, I'm getting up at 4 a.m. and taking the new A line over to Lagoon Drive, and I'm going to hop on there and talk to the riders and see, what their hopes are for the system, and really get some feedback on things like Bill 60.
So 4 a.m. if you want to catch the councilman, you can catch him, and the ride is free. What could be better? Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, the countdown is on, just a few days away from segment 2 for the Honolulu Skyline. Again, this is a project that has gone on for a very long time, and many of the city officials, and including our guests here today, are very excited and optimistic of what this second segment will mean for overall ridership and commuter traffic in Honolulu.
Yeah, and you heard there from both of our guests, Lori Kahikina and then Councilmember Dos Santos-Tam, about the change in sentiment that they're hearing about the project, and that gives them the push, especially the council member there, to introduce Bill 60 that would allow the HART project basically to go out and start to purchase property and start to make plans to extend this all the way to UH Manoa. No mechanism to pay for that right now, but at least to start the planning.
Yeah, they really, both of them address the importance and need for this bill to pass to allow the conversation to even happen, because at this point in time, the limitations of Ala Moana, of the rail going to Ala Moana, is where things are currently standing. So we'll see how this bill kind of moves along and what ridership looks like next week.
Yeah, a free weekend if you're planning to head out to the rail project. And next week, right here on Spotlight Now, we'll be talking to Governor Josh Green. He's in Japan, just getting back, so we'll ask him about his trip and also what's happening with federal policy, what all of the shutdown, if that's still going on, means for Hawaii. Please do join us next week, Tuesday, right here on Spotlight Now.
And remember, you can always email us your questions at spotlightnow@hawaiinewsnow.com. We'll see you right back here next week, Tuesday. Aloha.